back again on the Call to Community series here. We are at chapter 22, which is entitled God's Call, and it's excerpts from the writings of two leaders from the L'Arche community. And as many people will probably know, the L'Arche community...
well, they're an interabled community, so...
Thanks, Rich.
People with different forms of disability living together in house communities or larger settlements and taken care of by volunteers. And really a beautiful example of, people being the hands and feet of Jesus to, those who are not able to do many of the things that we take for granted.
Right.
So they have a lot of, these writers have a lot of insight. Henry Nouwen and Jean Vanier have a lot of, real world experience,
right.
I would say.
And also just taking care of the least of these, so great community. And to kicking off the chapter, Henry Nouwen talks about the basis of community and how it's not about familial ties or shared economic realities or any of these superficial things that bind us together. It's really about looking forward towards Christ and his call to each of us, and also moving forward continuously. So there's a lot of really interesting and challenging concepts in this segment of the chapter. And one of the things we should definitely discuss is how the call to community is this mystery that nobody understands and nobody particularly wants necessarily, but must be obeyed, and then it only works if the focus is on Christ. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on how people from very dissimilar backgrounds who don't share a culture, who don't share any sort of human connection, can come together and be called to the same community.
Well, I think it's just as you said. I mean, that only works if we are both, in community with our dissimilarities, if we're all looking forward and we're not, Henry Nouwen puts it this way, our eyes should not remain fixed on each other, but be directed forward to what is dawning on the horizon of our existence. The Christian community is not a closed circle of people embracing each other, but a forward-moving group of companions bound together by the same voice asking for their attention. And that voice is Jesus' call in our lives, which pulls us out of our natural, comfortable spaces and into a new land, into something very different. And I just thought this is something I'd love to talk about with you here, there's a small anecdote which I found especially striking thinking of our Bruderhof communities, now over 100 years in existence. Nouwen writes, during the last few years, I was part of a small group of students who regularly celebrated the Eucharist together. We felt very comfortable with each other and had found our own way. The songs we sang, the words we used, the greetings we exchanged all seemed quite natural and spontaneous. But when a few new students joined us, we discovered that we expected them to follow our way and go along with the way we do things here. We had to face the fact that we had become clannish, substituting our minds for the mind of Jesus Christ. Then we found out how hard it is to give up familiar ways and create space for the strangers to make a new common prayer possible. And what do you think about that? I mean, we have, lived together for a long time. Not us, but as a community, we've been together, and naturally you adopt certain habits of life together. We understand, things that might not be right away clear to someone visiting, like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. The songs we sing, the way we worship, the way we experience life together can be very foreign. And how do we keep from becoming clannish?
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to the beginning of the excerpt, how he talks about not looking at each other with the eyes of our heart, but looking towards Christ, because I think Christ's example of just everyone he connected with, it didn't matter who it was. It was a centurion, it was the fisherman, it was just the woman going about her daily tasks and not necessarily looking for Christ, but Christ came and found them. And I think that is such an amazing example of just rejecting like humanism and knowing that we're probably going to fall prey to just what we're comfortable with, but like not necessarily being fine with that, and being able to have the resolve and courage to reach out to anyone and to accept other people's traditions or see how they worship.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really takes humility on both sides, both on the side of the people seeking to join an established fellowship,
sure.
and then humility on the part of the people within the fellowship, that, you know, within the community, that, you know, we don't have everything figured out, and maybe, you know, we could interrogate some of the things we do. But I really, you know, you also can't be the new member coming in and swinging a sledgehammer and, you know, and just breaking things for the sake of breaking things. And maybe sit and learn from something. You know, not long ago we were talking about the question of dress, which is a distinctive thing for our community, and someone said something really important, I thought, which was, before you give something up, you know, before you say, you know, we don't need this or that aspect of you know, our practice of faith, you really need to understand why you took it up in the first place. You really need to have a firm grasp of and see if that thing is really an essential part, so that you don't inadvertently, as so many churches do, you know, you throw one thing out after the next in order to conform,
And then lose everything.
and then lose everything. So I thought that was a really interesting, and I think actually like a better way to look at this is, and we've seen this in our history, is that it's not a question so much of throwing out old ways as it is grafting on new
as
things,
seeking
new
renewal
expressions.
and rebirth, or
Right.
and I think just taking a look back at our own history, it is very inspiring to see how the outside pressures of the world often force the community to change or move. For example, you know, starting in Germany and then under the Nazi regime being forced to flee to England, and then England also rejecting the community and then going to Paraguay, and just all the different people that were called along the way. I think in any sort of human setting or understanding, it shouldn't have been possible. They were just too culturally different, or all over the map, also economically, you know, from different backgrounds and professions and levels of education. Yeah, all of that was transcended by this call and by this moving forward that Nouwen talks about in this chapter. So for me, that's always like a very inspiring picture or tapestry of like how this is possible and how it continues to be possible in our current setting.
Right. Yeah, no, the differences were transcended, but they were in no way ignored. So, you know, recently we've had more and more interest in joining from South Korea, right? And rather than saying, you know, let's throw out all the German folk songs or like the American folk songs that were brought by members who, you know, and we should only sing Korean songs now, or whatever. New expressions of culture, new expressions of being are grafted on to the community and added. So, for example, recently we celebrated, you know, the New Year, the Korean New Year, Chinese New Year, which is important to our Korean brothers and sisters, and it was a wonderful experience that they led and were part of, and everyone really enjoyed, you know, enjoyed that. And I find that a beautiful thing. It may be kind of an unfashionable, some might call it cultural appropriation. I don't think of it at all like that.
Yeah, you could pick everything apart. But
we
it's
choose to have fun here. Anyway, so, yeah, the next part is by Jean Vanier, starts, "The community is a place of pain." We'll prefer to leave it on a happy note. I mean, he has some good points there that, you know, you can really only live in the struggle, in the pain of the community if you're certain of the call. And that's, you know, that is true. Hard times do come, and the only way you stick through them is if you know that you have a call.
And then also just being realistic about that call is not going to always keep you on a high, or being completely certain all the time, and it's not about that. It's beyond that.
So be assured, if you do end up visiting or joining a Bruderhof, you don't have to become like anyone here. You can bring something of your own along. As long as, probably not anything, but anyway.
We can talk more.
We can talk more. Well, that's all for this week. Thanks. See you next week.